Hi, it's the world according to Steph had quite a problem today. Had to switch back to a different computer. I think that's God's way of telling me you messed up, Steph. You bought a computer that you don't even like anymore. I'm back to my regular other Windows computer, and I think I got the sound straightened out. I think I got everything straightened out, and I hope the picture's coming through pretty good. Now, I got a lot to talk to you about, so this is going to be it's Spiritual Foundations, chapter 28, part 1. Because, over the weekend here, I have been doing an amazing amount of study. And I'm used to that, to be honest with you. I was a computer scientist for 30 years. And I know you might look at me and think, how old is this woman? Well, I'm 59 years old. Okay? And I had a family to support. So even before I ended my college degree period, I was out in the field working. Okay? When I went to DeVry, that was long after. In fact, I was still working. I was working at the bank when I went to DeVry. Okay? But I started at DeVry before I went to the bank. But I was still working at the bank when I finished up at DeVry. I know it sounds complicated, but anyway, I want to tell you a little about me because you really don't know. So I decided today, first of all, I'm going to tell you about me and how I do things. Okay? I came from, you probably haven't read any of my writings, so I'll just give you an update. I came from a family of 6 children. I was the oldest. My father is an Irish American man, and believe me, he is Irish. And my mother is a quarter Shawnee, and she definitely looks it. But here she popped out 6 real white little children. Of course, out of the 6, I'm the only one with naturally reddish blonde hair, which it is reddish blonde, but you probably can't tell in this video or in any of the others. But anyway, as I've gotten older, I'm 59. I mean, come on. I do have a couple of gray areas I've noticed, so the hair is changing. And that's life. That's what happens. But it's slow to change. And that's the way my father is. He's the exact same way. Took him a long time to finally get gray. Probably the Irish in me. Because the Shawnee doesn't work that way. My mother grayed real early in life. But anyway, I have very long hair. Always, for the most part of my life I have, but there were times when I cut it foolishly. And one time when I cut it, my father actually cried. I was an adult. I didn't even live near him. But when he saw the way I'd cut it, he cried. It was my Irish grandmother who always had very long hair. It wasn't my Shawnee mother, it was my Irish grandmother. Okay? So it really meant something to my father for one of his girls to allow herself to be in a natural form. And I did. Most of my life. I never dyed my hair. Not ever. Anyway, then I married 2 men that beat me. One of them beat me so horrifically that he broke my neck. Okay? Now, I don't talk about this much, but I think y'all need to know a little bit about it. He was so abusive that he kept me a prisoner, and I called it POW, my POW time. And he beat me every single day for 4 to 5 months that he kept me prisoner. And this man would not let me out of his sight for 1 minute. I was only 18 years old when I married him. I was a very young girl, and I was very highly intelligent. At least my father had tests run on me when I was 12 years old, and they claimed I was. But and later on, I was to find out that yes, I must have pretty high intelligence because of what I'm going to tell you about. But when I was with this first husband, I didn't believe that I was highly intelligent. I didn't believe that I was pretty. I didn't believe anything good about me because I'd gone through some other terrible things in my life too. And when I married this man, it wasn't for love. It was because I felt I had no choices in my life after I graduated from high school. Okay? Well, I did have choices, but I just back then didn't realize it. I had to learn all of this. I almost had to learn how to become a person all over again. And I'm going to get into that just slightly here. My book talks about it. That's why I encourage people to start reading all of the pieces that I'm putting together, the little mini-series. No, it's not perfect. I do go back in and try to fix it where there are grammatical errors. But I'm very busy right now, believe it or not, as disabled as I am. And it's hard for me to do all of this and then go in there and do that. But anyway, I married this man because I thought, my mother used to always say, when you children are 18, you're out. And she didn't say it in a very nice way. Trust me. When I was 18, I was scared to death. I thought, uh-oh, I'm going to be out. Even though I had a great job. I mean, a great job for no college education. And if I had stayed with them, oh man, it would have been wonderful. They would have paid for my college. They would have done everything. But you know, I was foolish. I was a very foolish young woman, and I was, how do I put this? I had some indoctrination done as a child, and that indoctrination worked the opposite of what my father was trying to do. Let's put it that way. Instead of becoming the great doctor or the great attorney that he was hoping for, I became the abused woman. And that became remember, everything is your choice. And it was my choice to do that. Before I actually married this man, he several times had pushed my face into a tree that was right outside our house in a Chicago suburb. And it did leave some marks, but not enough for anybody to really question it. Although my mother was very astute, and she did start to see things, okay? But this man was very good at convincing people that he was a cool, a nice guy type person. Now this was in 1971, for those of you who would really like to know. Remember, I'm 59. 1971, I married this man. Now, when he broke my neck, he not only broke my neck, but he messed up my face so bad that most of my family cried when they saw me. And my father wanted to kill him. I mean, literally have him exterminated. I have two brothers. And one of them used to be connected with some pretty strange people who almost killed him, by the way. I have an interesting family. I have an interesting life. And that's why it's really good if you read what I've written, because it's going to get even more interesting. It's going to tell you how I got connected to God, which saved my life, saved my soul. But anyway, so today I am fused from here to here. It took 3 operations to do that. They wanted to x-ray me about a year and a half ago, and it was hilarious because they said, now bend your chin down to your neck. Well, I can't bend my head. I can turn it a little bit, I can move it a little bit, and I can make you believe that I can turn it, but if I do it too much, I will pay a terrible price. And when they said that, I said, no, I can't. And they thought I was just being obstinate. And I said, no, I really can't. If you take a picture, you'll see why. Well, they took the picture and it was shock time. Oh my God, you have so much metal in you. Now, actually, the spine is all bone, all the way down. And it's been that way for a number of years now, so I'm pretty used to it. I drive. Even though I warn everybody I'm getting on the road. Now my lower spine is fused too because I broke my back, my lower back, when I was about 40 years old. And that was the beginning of my awakening, okay? And that was when I really realized, okay, there's a problem here. But I go ahead of myself. Let me tell you the rest of the story here. Okay, so I married this man purely because, first of all, he refused to think of us living together. He insisted that we be married. His family, he was just the second or third generation Russian family to come here from Russia. So really, in a way, I think it was extremely important to him for us to truly be married. I think we even went to the Catholic Church and did it. Even though I had left the Catholic Church long before that, my family had left it. That's a nice little story in itself, but that is also in the mini-series. So if you read my book, which is on Google Drive, and it's from a loving mother who may be dying. Now, I'm very well may be dying. We all might be dying. But I've actually changed that to from a loving mother's spiritual foundations. Because, I'm not going to make an affirmation that I'm going to be leaving. Okay? That's making an affirmation. And we'll talk about that. But let's get back to what I was saying. So he kept me almost practically tied up for 4 to 5 months. And I'm pretty independent. I have an independent nature. But I didn't even know it at the time. And he would just beat me every single day. And in fact, I had a friend that came one day and he had just beaten the crap out of me. And I do mean he had beaten me just horrifically. And my friend came and she called the police. Well, that was the worst thing to do. Because when the police came, I had always been threatened by him. We went to court one time. But I had always been threatened by him that if I ever filed a lawsuit, domestic threat or problem with him, that he would definitely kill me, whether I was living with him or wherever I was living. And I believed him. I honestly believed him, especially with what he had already done to me. He broke my neck. Now, you might say, well, if you had a broken neck, how come your arms still work and all that? Well, my arms don't still work. It's really a miracle that the spinal cord didn't have more damage than what it had. As far as the doctors back then could tell, remember this is 40-some years ago, they didn't know hardly anything about broken necks or broken any spine parts or anything. The only thing they knew was, well, let's slap some kind of brace on there and hope to God that the person can actually move their arms and breathe and everything else. Well, I could. reason for that, I really believe, was because I was a very flexible young woman. And by flexible, I mean I took dance, acrobatics, and all that kind of stuff, tap. And I was I was an excellent dancer, and I was very talented. And I believe that that flexibility and my age, because I just turned 18. This was 3 weeks after we were married that he did that. And I'm not going to get into why, because if you read my mini-series, you'll find out why. And then you'll be in shock. But anyway, when he kept me a POW, that was a horrible, horrible nightmare, because every single night that when we would go to bed, and he would always determine that we were going to bed. Everything was his decision. What I ate, what I wore, when we would go to bed, if I ever left the house. Everything was in his hands. I was never allowed out of his sight. And even if I tried to make the world go away and put headsets on and listen to Joni Mitchell, which probably most of you don't even know who Joni Mitchell was, he would come behind me with the towel, roll it up, wrap it around my neck, and start strangling me. And then I would beg him to stop because I really was dying. So he finally would. And every night he would take out this horrible looking axe out of the pantry in the kitchen. And he would say to me, "This could be the night that I cut your head off. You'll never know what night it's going to be." So I was awake most nights. And I don't like to talk about sex, but I am going to discuss a little bit in this marriage. Sex with him was really great. It was never, not in the beginning it wasn't, but after the marriage and the breakage of my neck and the constant beating, it became rape. And you women understand what I'm talking about, I'm sure. So anyway, a miracle happened. Now, at the time, I didn't associate that miracle with God, okay? But today I do. I know that God actually stepped in to save me, because I had a lot to do in life, an awful lot. And so a miracle happened one day, and he said, "Let's go to the park." And I feigned my illness. I said, "I don't feel well." And I honestly think he was hoping that I didn't feel well because I might be pregnant, because he wanted a child. And by the grace of God, I wasn't pregnant. I just pretended to him that I did not feel well, and I suggested that he go without me. Well, he did. And that was my moment in time when I could actually use the telephone, because I was never allowed to do that. My family was not allowed to call me anymore. I had not talked to anyone in my family for several months. Everybody in my family was worried sick, but they didn't know how to get me out. And they knew that I was going to have to, start the process. They knew that. But they were hoping, well, they weren't praying so much, but they were hoping that I would do something to get that process started. Well, he gave me that advantage. So I quickly I tried to call my father. I couldn't find him, so I called an aunt in Oak Park, Illinois. And she found my father. And my father, I gave her the number, and my father called me back immediately, and he said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. You be ready and waiting." And he said, "Don't worry about your clothes, your belongings, or anything. You just be ready, you get in the car, we're leaving." And that's exactly what happened. Now, I never saw my first husband again after that. And, well, I think I did one time. But when he realized it was me, he chased me in his car. and I did get away. So that was the good news. But he wanted to run me down. He wanted to kill me. And he was serious. This man wasn't playing around. He was absolutely serious. The night he broke my neck, he not only broke it, he ripped it open. I had to have stitches in it. I had to have stitches in other parts of my body that he had, just ripped me open, literally, with his bare hands. One of the police people cried. And the doctors, when they were treating me, they said, and they found out it was only 3 weeks after our marriage, they begged me to leave him. They said, he will kill you if you stay with him. He almost did tonight. Well, the only reason he stopped that night was because I pretended to be dead. And that was the only reason. He went into his bedroom, passed out. He was an alcoholic. And he passed out. And I crawled with a bobbing head down the steps. And fortunately for me, that's another miracle. The police department was actually just down the block a little ways, and that was it. Now, I'm telling you this because you need to realize that we need to look at our lives and see those miracles in our lives and see that, yes, he could have killed me. Maybe I shouldn't even be here, but I am. And then I had 3 children to boot. What a miracle. Now I have 3 grandchildren. What a miracle. So anyway, my next husband, well, I had a child in between this husband and my next husband. And unfortunately, though, I tried to raise that child, but unfortunately, there were some serious issues. And if you read my miniseries, you'll find out what happened. But God works in wonderful ways because he brings people back to us. My child was returned to me, and he rejoined my family of my 2 other children. So he was part of our family when I lost one of my children in the war in Afghanistan. And he was a hero. They honored him as a hero. I have a film of his military funeral. I have lots of stuff from the State Department of State, whatever. But he was a hero. And I honor him. No matter how I feel about what's happening in our country right now, I honor my child who died for his country. And I would fight for my child's honor any day of the week, even though maybe God doesn't want me to, but I would. I promise you, I would. This child was a special child to begin with. And as I said, if you read my miniseries, you'll understand. Now, my first son loved his half-brother, loved him tremendously. And when my son Matt passed, my first son just kind of went crazy on me. And I don't hear from him much, but when I do, it's strange conversations. And he had issues to begin with that I could not help him with. I tried to, but it just didn't work out. But I still remain his mother, always. I still have a connection to this young man. Well, he's almost 40 years old now. But I still have a connection to him because I am his mother. No matter what. No matter how, the fact that I didn't fully raise him makes no difference. I partially did raise him. I partially had him. And during that time, we had a connection. We had a soul-to-soul connection. And when I get to the part where he re-enters our life, you'll understand. Okay. Now that's a little background. Oh, let me talk about college. Now my second marriage, I had this idea in my head about life, frankly, that I wasn't good enough to go to school. So, but the best thing for me maybe was to be a mother and be a housewife or whatever. And if I had to have a job, okay, I could always be a bartender or waitress or something like that. Because I could do any of that stuff pretty good, actually. And I'd done it before, so I knew if I really had to do that, I could. So I married Matt's father when Matt was a year old. Yeah, yeah, we did things like that back then. Matt didn't remember not having his father, and that's good. His father moved to Texas, and then out of the blue, he called me one day. Again, another miracle that is talked about in my miniseries. I have lots of wonderful miracles that if you read it, you're going to say, wow, that really happened? I mean, what a miracle. You really are going to say, what a miracle. My whole life has been that way. Anyway, I ended up moving two of my children that I still had, Matt and his sister, my youngest child, my little girl, to the Missouri area after the beatings had begun. I could not live with a man who was going to beat me and lie to me again. And this man was doing that. But at the time, I thought I still loved him. I really did. And it was difficult to leave him. And my little boy, Matt, was about 4 years old by then. And he just cried and cried and cried for his daddy. And it was the toughest thing I ever did in my life to my child. And my little girl, she was just about to turn 2. So she doesn't even remember this, probably. And we tried going to my parents' house. That didn't work out. And we wound up living in my car, my used car that I had bought in Texas that I ended up having to fix all the time. Now, if you read my story, you'll understand that I knew a lot about mechanics. And that was a good thing. Because if I had a used car, I could generally get it fixed well enough to get it running. And then get it to a regular gas station for them to fix it better if I had the money. Anyway, my little children had to live in a car for a week. We were literally homeless. Now, I had lots of relatives in Kansas City because I was actually born there. We moved to Chicago after we lived in Iowa for a while, and then we moved to Chicago. So I didn't know my way around, but I knew my relatives that were there. Now, no one could actually let me and 2 children come and live with them. They just didn't have the facilities to do that. But they tried to help me. They did everything they could to help me. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, made every effort to help me. She was probably the biggest one, and my sister. So one day, I decided I just couldn't have my children sleeping in the car anymore. It was cold. It was not like being in Texas anymore. We were in Missouri now, and it was cold. It was early March or somewhere around there, and it was very, very cold. So I was afraid that my children would get sick because my daughter had asthma and all kinds of problems. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take some of this $150 that I have, and that was all I had, and I'm going to let my children spend the night in a warm room with real beds. So I rented a very cheap hotel room, and had both my babies with me in the bed and me. And when they went to sleep, beautifully went to sleep, I think I read them a story. I never wanted them to see the mother cry or be upset because I knew that would not be healthy. And I actually got on my knees and I said, if there is a God, please keep me alive to raise these children. Please. I'd already lost one child. I could not bear the idea of losing two more. It would have killed me. So here's the real miracle. I went to sleep and I slept well. The first night that I slept good. The next day, all kinds of things happened. My sister called my grandmother and told her, get my sister on the line. I was sitting out in her driveway. Oh no, I was at the hotel, but I came back to her house. That was where I kind of set up. During the day, I kind of sat around for a while trying to figure out what to do. Well, my sister called my grandmother, and my sister lived about 2.5 hours away from Kansas City, in Kansas. We were on the Missouri side. And she said, Steph, I'll take the kids for you. She had one little baby boy, 6 months old. And she was just about ready to get married to Ron, who is now gone. He passed on. That was her husband. And my brother-in-law, who I considered more of a brother than anything else, to be honest with you. But anyway, she and Ron offered to take my children for me, and then I would, once I got a job, I knew I could go out and visit them every week, and that was my plan. So I took them out there, and I kissed them goodbye, and I promised them that Mommy wasn't going away, that Mommy was just going to be gone for a little while, and they were going to stay with their Aunt Liz. And my 2-year-old little daughter just cried her eyes out, and I held her and told her everything was going to be okay. She hadn't even turned 2 yet, but she had been very sick down in Texas, and lots of bad things had happened to her, and she was very precious to me. My little boy was okay because he liked Aunt Liz. We had been there several times while they were growing into that age. But anyway, I left. The very next day, my grandmother allowed me to stay in her place. She did have room for me, but she didn't have room for all of us. So I pulled out the couch, and that's where I would sleep. And here's where the miracles came in. Now, this is all within 2-3 days after I got on my knees and I said, if there is a God, with all my heart, I got on my knees and I said, I need help. I have needs for my children and myself. Although I didn't add myself in, all I said was, keep me alive to raise these children. And that is precisely what happened. I found a job as a cocktail waitress. The bartender kind of liked me a little bit, so he helped me out. One of my cousins helped me find a really cheap place to live, but it cost a lot to get in. And there was another twist. I wasn't divorced. So I had to bring my husband in to sign the papers to get into this place. Well, here's where the miracles come in. I never called him. He called me. And my grandmother was very wise at this point in time. And she said, I suggest that you write up a list of what he needs to, how he needs to behave so that if you want to really take them back, that's how you'll take them back. So I did. I can even remember what was on that list. One of them, of course, was no more abuse. And he agreed to everything. So we set up a time frame for him to join me. I told it wasn't really, it was a townhouse, and it was I don't know how to describe it, but it was very cheap. It was bent on letting like medical students and people like that to live there while they were going to medical school. Anyway, I had to repaint this whole place. So my cousin and I repainted it, got it all cleaned up, got it all ready. I bought some very cheap carpeting for the living room because it was wood. I was worried about my children falling and seriously hurting themselves. I left the rest of the wood like it was upstairs. The only part I carpeted was down in the living room. And when my husband arrived, he put in, carpet tie downs, whatever they're called. And back then they were the little metal strips. And he did all that. And that was good. I even put carpet padding underneath it. It was cheap, but at least it worked. And it worked for 8 years, by the way. Okay, now, when all this was done and I was able to bring my children back home, that happened within a 3-week period. 3 weeks. I found a home. I reunited with my husband, and I brought my children back home. To a home. And they were so excited. They were so happy. And they had their father back. So then, about 2 years later, I started going to college. I decided, I'd met some friends. I'd made some really good friends there. And one of my friends, a male friend, he was a boyfriend of my girlfriend, he said that he wanted to go to school too. So it was because of him that I got the courage up to go back to college. Because I think I was about 27, 28 then, and it was really scary to go back to school. It would have been a lot easier just keeping a job as a bartender, because that's what I was by then. And I was bringing enough home, with tips and everything. Trouble was, I was starting to drink a little bit. When they bought us shots, I was starting to really make them shots for me, instead of what we usually did, and just put water in there and pretend it. But no, Steph started actually drinking these. And so there were times when I didn't even remember closing up house or closing shop. But according to my employers, my, what do they call it, the bank or whatever, was always right on. So I never ever, even in a blackout, had any problem counting back money or anything. Never. But the point is that I knew that it was bad, and I knew it was going to hurt my family, and I knew I had to stop right now. So I did, and I went back to school. And I was so nervous, it was unbelievable, but you know what? I took that first step, and I did it. And when I did, I was in a whole new world. It was wonderful. Now, I'd started out going to school for something totally different. I was going to be an accountant. My father suggested it to me, because in his mind, an accounting degree, I could work just about anywhere. And he was right. So the first year, or the first semester, I should say, My degree program was for accounting, and they told me all I had to take. Okay, that's how it usually works, even today. And I took an accounting course, first one, and I thought, oh my God, this is the most boring thing in the world. But the funny thing is, there we go with the miracles again. God did something really cool. Not only was I taking an accounting course, but I was taking a data processing class. It was now a requirement in all fields. Now, by data processing, I mean we did learn how to program in a language, a real language, programming language, but it was a mainframe. It was not PCs. Okay. When you went to school for programming back then, that was mainframe programming. Almost all my programming classes were done on mainframe. Now, the good news is, I may have thought the accounting was horribly boring, but I loved the data processing class. And I knew immediately that that was the direction I wanted to go. So I found the professor of the whole department, and I sat down and I talked to him, and he helped me. I mean, he helped me tremendously, because the next semester I changed my whole degree program, and I had to start out with simple math all the way, but I went all the way to count 3. Okay. When I left that college, I had a 3.8 GPA. I could have had a 4.0, but I had a few issues while I was in that college. I had to divorce my husband, and that made things pretty difficult. I had 2 children to support, and I wasn't anywhere near done with my program, or the one that I was on. It was an engineering computer science degree. I was going to relocate in Rolla, Missouri, at the University of Missouri down in Rolla. It was an excellent engineering school. And my professor was an engineer, and that is precisely what he wanted me to do. I worked for him. I was his TA. So anyway, I kept thinking that I didn't have much choices. Okay, there's that way of thinking, no choice. Well, that's a ridiculous thing. We have many choices in life, and the first thing we have to learn to do is to trust in God. If you trust in God, you're unlimited in your choices. Unfortunately, at that time in my life, I didn't realize it. I didn't understand that yet. So I was no longer with my husband. He had long gone. I was working 3 jobs, but they weren't outside of the college. They were all within the college. Because I had gone so far in math, the math department wanted me to change my degree for math, because I'd made almost straight A's in math. And it was when I got into calculus that the B's came into play. That was a whole new kind of math for me, let me tell you. But if you wanted to be an engineer, that was what you had to do. Now, unfortunately, my professor was so disappointed that I did not go on with that program. I mean, he was just really disappointed, truly. And I kept telling him, but I have 2 children to support, and I have to be concerned with how to get them properly supported. It means that I will have to finish my degree somewhere else, close by, and work at the same time. Well, that is exactly what I ended up doing. But I changed my degree from engineering to computer science business synthesis. Now the good news is I'd taken all kinds of classes that weren't even required of me, but they actually worked towards my degree. I took a lot of history. I took political science. These were things I was interested in. I even wanted to take an art class one time, just because I wanted to. But when the marriage was destroyed or gone, I knew that for my children's sake, there was no more fun classes now. I wasn't going to be able to do that. Every class I took was going to have to go towards the degree. So I was past an associate's degree by then, way past. I'd taken every computer science class known to man. And I even started working on PCs. They had just come into play. Networking was around, but not too many companies were using PCs and networks, okay? My first actual programming job was one that I literally had to beg for the job. I had to convince them that I could really do it. I had to take a special psychological test to even get in the doors. And then I had to convince some of the owners that I could do it. Well, I'd never even seen this language before. It was a database language, and it was on a PC, standalone PC. I was used to mainframe stuff. I'd taken one course in PCs, and that was it. So you know what I did? I took another course that they suddenly introduced. It was on database programming. So, not too many women were taking any of these courses, by the way. This was a long time ago. And so, I took that database course so I could learn or understand just how this thing worked. And when I took that database course, that was it for me. I knew exactly what kind of programmer I was going to be. And I got in there and I showed those people that I darn well knew exactly what to do. I had all kinds of imagination and vision for them. If they weren't going to internet, not internet, but network their computers, I figured out another way to move the data from one place to another, one location to another. I wrote programs to do that. I was a DOS programmer and a database programmer. So you don't find that around here too much anymore because they don't need them unless you do the insides of a computer. Anyway, that's pretty much my story. And the last thing I'm going to tell you is that something very wonderful happened to me about 19 years ago, besides breaking my lower back. If you think that all these things that sounded terrible happened to me were terrible, don't think that way. They were my lessons in life. They brought me to a place that I would never come to had these not happened. These things had to happen for me to know that I was loved and that I could love myself. I had to learn all that like anybody else. But for many, many years, I thought that I was a terrible human being, even though look at all the accomplishments I've done. And by the end of my working career, I was a IT project manager in a fairly large bank. I was way up there, trust me, way up there. And, it was a managerial title. I found one of my cards just recently. But the point is that I went from begging for a job, I'll do anything if you let me start programming too, to having several other programming jobs right off the bat, teaching myself how to network, networking another company when I actually self-taught myself how to do it, and learned from a networking company the basics. Now they have tests that you can take to certify yourself. I could have taken those tests and passed easily. I ended up putting a network in my own home with 4 computers. My children grew up on computers. And when we started integrating into the internet, so did I with my own network. So my children were like 12 and 13 years old, and they were already on email. And that's probably before many of you even started using the internet. These children were, my daughter was 13 years old, so that was 20 years ago. 20 years ago. But anyway, that's enough about me for now. But I felt that you needed to know a little background on me. The fact that I do, when I research something, I truly research. Now, there's something that I am going to talk about, but not right now. That's going to be in the second part that I've been working on all weekend. I hope you all watch this because it's important for you to know who I am. Thank you and bless you.